Welcome to the third episode of Season 2 of The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. This one is called Willy Gets In on the Act. A little background. Willy is the son of Sid's oldest daughter, Abby. He was there with his mom and grandma the day before, just after Sid came out of surgery, and he thought he'd heard his grandfather mutter a word that sounded something like Bizarro. Bizarro? Sid asked. That's what it sounded like, Grandpa, Abby's son Willy said the next day, when his mom brought him over to deliver a framed blow-up of the selfie he'd taken of the two of them after surgery. Geez, I don't look so good, do I? Sid said ruefully. Willy couldn't exactly disagree. But you look fabulous. Good job on the hair, Sid said. Willy, with his girlfriend's encouragement, was spiking it straight up with a little orange for good measure. Abby couldn't stand it, but had decided to hold her fire until the big teenage battles. Besides, she liked Camille. Well, it was pretty bizarro, Sid said. Maybe Todd slipped some ecstasy into the IV. I felt like I died and gone to heaven. I don't know, Willy remembered. You seemed kind of upset when we saw you after surgery. But you did mumble something about a stairway to heaven. Didn't some group in your generation do a song called that? That wasn't, Sid began with feigned sarcasm, some group in my generation. That was Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant to be precise, with Jimmy Page to be even more precise. The kind of wisdom you kids can only dream of. Sid began humming before bursting full on into song. There's a sign on the wall, but she wants to be sure. 'Cause you know sometimes words have two meanings. Ooh, it makes me wonder. Sid did wonder. He wondered what the rest of the lyrics were. Then he remembered another verse. There's a feeling I get when I look to the west, and my spirit is crying for leaving. That's who was crying, Sid thought, before jumping to the last lines, while Willy struggled to keep up. When all are one, and one is all, to be a rock, and not to roll. And she's buying a stairway to heaven. Stairway to heaven? The Buddha wondered. Why would you want to climb up to where you already are? And pay for it? He could only shake his head. Jacob had started the whole thing with his ladder. That was strictly for angels. We're talking tough love, one of my 3 favorite grandsons, Sid said, as if that explained his disappearance down a 1971 rock and roll sinkhole. Okay, now we have to figure out who Bizarro is, or was, or will be. Well, that's what I heard. Mom thought it was more like Pizarro. Okay, go look up Pizarro. Willy took out his iPhone. He was glad to have something useful to do. His grandfather could make him feel both more loved and more uncomfortable than even his girlfriend Camille. How is Camille anyway? Sid asked. How did he do that? Willy thought. He blushed, hoping Sid didn't notice, and then gasped when he saw Pizarro's bio. Wow, there's a Pizarro whose first name was Camille, a painter. I don't know why he had a girl's name. Your girlfriend's name, to be precise. But no, it's not him, not an artist. I'm getting more of a warrior vibe. Sid broke into a smile. I got it. It's Zorro, not Zarro. Who's that? Willy asked. The masked man. Don't they teach you anything in school? Look him up. Willy read slowly. Zorro is a fictional character created in 1919 by pulp writer Johnston Macaulay. Sid waited for the usual frisson of recognition, but it didn't come. Dead end. Willy's cell phone dinged. Tell Camille I said hi. He looked at the text and wrote back quickly. With Grandpa. He's okay, I think. Hard to tell. He says hi. Sid was mumbling to himself. Zorro, Pizarro, Bizarro, Busto, Bluto, Pisto, Pistol, Pizarro. Pizarro! He grinned. Bingo! Look up Pizarro, Willy. I think he was one of those guys who didn't discover the Americas. Time to go, Willy, Abby said, walking into the room with Diane after a short cry and long conversation over coffee downstairs in the cafeteria. Wait, I'm looking up something for Grandpa Sid. You can do it when we get home. Sid called Willy right after dinner that evening and commanded him to prepare a report on the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro. "When would you like this paper, Professor Sid?" Willy asked, having regained some of his teenage swagger. "Professor Sid. That's more like it, Willy. I'm making my triumphant return home tomorrow. We shall reconvene after school the next day." Willy agreed, realizing ChatGPT could do the paper for him in a few seconds. Sid wouldn't know. "And by the way, no artificial intelligence." The Buddha sighed. To his bemusement, the phrase kept on coming up these days. All human intelligence is artificial, he thought. Wisdom, that's something else. And vision? Nothing artificial about that. After school, Willy had a rehearsal for the school play, a scaled-down version of The Misfits. He was the old cowboy, Gaylord Gay Langland, played by Cary Grant. Camille, of course, was the divorcee Rosalind Tabor, who Marilyn Monroe played in the film. But now Willy was sitting in a straight-back chair in his grandparents' bedroom with his tablet on his lap. He still had on the checked shirt and string tie from rehearsal, jeans with a big belt buckle, his legs tucked into kick-ass cowboy boots, all topped off with a cowboy hat that featured the feather Camille had coyly given him after they technically made it to second base between rehearsals for the first and second acts. Like any self-respecting 13-year-old, Willy was usually diffident in the face of any adult request, unless it was accompanied by the promise of money. But this was Grandpa Sid, and Sid had cancer, and although it was hard to get straight answers out of grown-ups, especially when they didn't have any straight answers to give, he had enough sense of the dramatic to assume it wouldn't end well. He would respond to this tragic event with an air of stoic suffering that girls his age found irresistible. Maybe even his teachers would cut him some slack. Not that he wanted Sid to die. In fact, he felt a little guilty for having these thoughts in the first place. "Just think how romantic it will be when I die. Girls love that stuff," Sid said. "Really?" Willy said as innocently as possible. "What do you mean?" One look made it clear that his grandfather had seen through him again. "Okay, let's get to work, forward into the past. But first help me get my pillow set," Sid said painfully, pushing himself up a little straighter and leaning forward while Willy rearranged the pillows. "Now I am prepared to receive the report from my loyal subject." Willy sat up a little straighter and began reading from his tablet. Francisco Pizarro Gonzalez was a Spanish conquistador who led an expedition that conquered the Incan Empire. Whoa, Sid said, stretching his arms straight out in a troublingly Hitler-like way. "I can read Wikipedia as well as the next guy with the hole in his head." "I didn't look it up in Wikipedia," Willy objected, which was technically true. "Willy," Sid said with what passed in his world for a serious expression, "I didn't ask you to write your paper so you could read about Pizarro. I asked you to write it so you could be Pizarro." Willy was embarrassed, confused, nervous in a way. He didn't want to disappoint Sid, but... "Willy, chill. You want to be an actor, right? Be an actor. Get up and stand over there in front of the coffee table. No, first grab that floor lamp. You'll like her. She's Greek." The floor lamp was a 6-foot-high sculpture of a barefoot lady, her loose toga falling off her right shoulder and breast. "Now grab her arm with your right hand like you were holding a staff, so to speak. You can reach around and feel her breasts. After we're done, I'll warn you if your mom's coming. Don't forget to breathe," Sid reminded him. Willy realized that indeed his breath had been hovering between in and out for the last few seconds. "Okay, close your eyes. Imagine yourself as Pizarro and let it rip." Willy took another deep breath, began to sway, and held on tighter to the statue's arm. He began tentatively, "am Francisco Pizarro Gonzalez, the Spanish conquistador who conquered the Incans." He opened his eyes and peeked at Sid, who was leaning a little forward, his eyes wide. He was looking for something much bigger than a nervous teenager holding to the arm of a Greek goddess. Willy closed his eyes and tried to let it rip. In 1513, I discovered the Pacific Ocean. Willy's voice had gone lower, but he still sounded like a 21st century boy, pretending to be a 16th century explorer. I was crazy like a fox, Willy hissed, blinded by the wealth I'd seen in the land you now call South America, parts of your Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile. He said, yours, Sid thought. Here we go. Maybe he does have the gift. He was about to prod him further, but made himself wait. I wanted that gold, Willy hissed menacingly again, and then quickly turned imperious, thrusting out his chest and raising himself to his full 5'4" tall height. And I was determined to convince those heathens to accept Christ as their savior and swear obedience to the King of Spain. Willy's eyes had closed. He still knew he was acting, but it felt different. He knew who he was, but he was equally someone else. It was exhilarating. But wherever we went, we heard tales of a king of unspeakable power and wealth who ruled the land. Only he, Willy shouted the word, stood between me and my destiny. Ah, the king, Sid thought. Come on, boy. What was the kid's name? He whispered. Pizarro was just the herald. It was the king who was waiting in the wings. That's who was coming. Months later, we were there, in the plaza of Cajamarca. Now Willy's voice was all over the place, a touch of 40s newsreel drama. But Cajamarca, wherever it was pure Spanish. Sid wondered if he was taking Spanish in school. We were just 100 on foot, 67 on horses, 3 aquabuses, and 2 falconets. They were 6,000 natives surrounding the plaza with 50,000 more behind them. What the fuck is an arquebus? Sid wondered. But Willy brought him back. I stood before their king, my armor gleaming, my sword pointed to the heavens, as I demanded tribute in the name of our kingdom. Willy now held the statue around her waist, but his right arm was raised and pointing as if to a far-off land. His face took on a fierce grimace. But he refused, heathen savage, he refused. What's his name? Sid whispered. Tell me his name, Pizarro. I need to hear you say it. Force him into view. In that moment, he sealed his doom. Atahualpa would never reign again. Sid got the frisson. Atahualpa. That's the name. He's the one. But who is he? And why is he back? What does he want to say? Whatever it is, the Buddha smiled. He's going to have to get in line. Thanks again for listening to The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. As mentioned, I've printed a limited edition of Season 1 of The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha, and I'm sending one, along with a custom Sid Om cap, to anyone who signs up or has signed up for an annual paid subscription. Regardless, thanks for listening.